Hayom Yom Rishon. Today is Sunday. Yud Daled Shvat. Yod. Yad. Between Yud Gimel and Tezvav is Yud Daled. Yud Gimel Shvat is the yard time of the Rebbe Sarah, and Tezvav Shvat is Rosh Hashanah Le'ilon, and in between you have Yud Daled Shvat. What does it mean? I have no clue. Yud Daled is B'Gematria David. That's Yud Daled is B'Gematria David, and it makes sense. You know why? Because David was the 14th generation. Shlomo is the 15th generation. David is the 14th generation. For those who say Kiddush Lavona, last night was the last night. Tonight, I don't know. Tonight, last night. Because David and Shlomo, the reason their Malchus was so successful because the moon was full. That's the Remez, Yudalad. Also even Yodes, a Yad. A Yad has 14 a hand has 14 visible digits. There's 14 visible. 3, 3, 3, 3, and 2 is a Yad. You have 2 Yodes that you have in Kehelis. Yudalim itim l'toiva, Yudalim itim l'ra. You know, Eis l'david, Eis l'achshes. There's 28 of them. There's 14 pairs. And there's a whole thing in Chassidus by the name of Yad and fingers. Okay, I can talk about it, but I don't want to. It helped us out. Yeah. Yeah, that's what they need. Yad is David, that's it. You know that in Kiddush Lavana, ladies don't say Kiddush Lavana. It says David Melech Hasal Chavakayim. And David goes on Mashiach Tzidkeinu. Okay, we're learning Tanya, Rabbi say. And last Sunday I gave you a class. But how I prepare. If I come to teach, I try to prepare. I don't just come. But not always do you hit a home run. I wouldn't say that last week's Tanya class was the best class I ever gave. And I may have left a little haze last week. So I'm not repeating last week's class, I'm just clarifying. Okay? And I'm giving you context. Context. That's what I do. Context. What's going on? The context is that we're talking about a Beinani who's called Madregas HaBeinani. And Madregas HaBeinani is a combination of 2 words. The definition of Madregas HaBeinani is 2 words. Melucha and Memshala. You've heard it so many times, you're bored of it. Not only you can't forget it, how many times is he going to say it? Which is exactly what I want. Melucha and Memshala. Madregas HaBeinani is a synthesis, it's an interface of a time when he's a melech. A melech means like a tzaddik. He kings over his Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara is not functional. He's a king over his body, and the way of that's melech. Malchus Eberatz. A king is accepted willfully. You're happy to accept a king. You choose to accept a king. You encourage him to be a king, like we do with the Eibush Kvayachol on the Reish Hashon. When a Yid davens, the goof is mamlech the Nefesh Elokis. The Nefesh Abahamis is mamlech the Nefesh Elokis. Because during davening, everybody is cooperating. Because the Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem make it so. That's davening. The rest of the day, you're not a melech, you're a moshel. You still don't do any Avedas. But now you got a counterpart, you have a counterpoint, you have an opponent, you have the umazeh. And the Yetzer Hara wants to do what it wants. And the Yetzer Hara is not saying, I love you, Nefesh Elokis. The Yetzer Hara is saying, I love you, Guf. Zayma Malatayv. And the Yetzer Tov says, I love you, Guf. Serve the Eibishter. So in the final analysis, at the end of the day, the person doesn't listen to the Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh Abahamis. He listens instead to the Nefesh Elokis and the Yetzer Tov. But you're not going to call it Melucha, it's called Memshala, it's called Shlita. He's stronger than the Yetzer Hara. Why? 2 reasons. And I gave you 2 separate classes, the Kavanah. Yeah. The first reason the Yetzer Tov is stronger than the Yetzer Hara, even though they're 2 equal and opposite voices, is because Meir Shalta Alev, right? Kedisa b'Rai Mehemne, b'Tuldase, b'Teva Yetziras. There's a teva, there's a nature of Meir Shalta Alev, and it's very important to understand. The word teva, b'Klav, is not used by the neshama. There's an exception to this rule in chapter 19. But the word teva is used by Nefesh Abahamis. Nature is an animal trait. Nature means something which is superimposed. You don't create your nature, God gives you a nature. We're learning now Tanya. We started today Chof Dalet in the Chitas. Chapter 24. One of the interesting discussions of 24, it was in today's Chitas, it's going to be in tomorrow's Chitas, is the Nefesh Abahamis has a nature. The animal soul has a nature. And the animal soul's nature limit it. They limit it in terms of how much it's going to love God, but they also limit it in terms terms of how rebellious he's going to be against God. That's what one of the ideas which is very central in chapter 24, Perikov Dalet, is the teva of the Nefesh HaBahamis. Teva. So when you say Moach Shaltla B'tivoi, you're not talking teva of Nefesh HaLakis. Nefesh HaLakis is higher than teva. Nefesh HaLakis is free. Teva means a personality and a nature. So we're saying that the ability for the Nefesh HaLakis and the Yitzatei to defeat the Yetzer Hara and Nefesh HaBahamis, Shalei B'shas HaTefillah, not during davening, you're not inspired, you're not emotionally aroused, you're not in a state of melucha, is because it's the teva, the nature of the person, the nature of the animal soul is maya shalta lalev. And if a person is a beinani taken, which means he has never done any avedas, that's a touch of beinani, that teva is intact. That teva. And again, the key to the word teva is that the nefesh habahamis is nature, that the mind should dominate the heart, and the mind is the seat of the nefesh halakis. The heart is the seat of the nefesh habahamis. So the nefesh halakis wins. The teva. You see, but it does not work if you're about children. It does not work if you're on your way to becoming about children. Because then you weakened the teva through not good things. Then it becomes harder. But in Tanya Yud Beis, chapter 12, we're talking about Madregas HaBeinani, and of course we already know Madregas HaBeinani is the combined ideas of Melucha and Memshala. When Madregas HaBeinani is in a state of Memshala, when the Madregas HaBeinani is in a state of Shlita, why does the Nefesh HaLakis win every time and the Shamas lose every time? Because he's never done Avedas, and therefore the Teva has not been diminished, and the Teva, that means the Nefesh HaBahamis, Teva, this was 2 weeks ago. What was last week? A second idea. To be sure, the second idea is actually Eideled than the first idea. Because the second idea already is about Lukus. This is what I tried to communicate last week, and maybe I didn't say it clearly enough. And that is that it says in Chassidus, in chapter 29 in Tanya, that good and evil is like light and darkness. Toiv and Ra is like light and darkness. Light and darkness cannot fight. It's impossible. Because darkness doesn't exist. Darkness only exists because there's no light. Now you learn chapter 29, you learn Takapedi Chavtes of Tanya. So that the Alter Rebbe asks the Klotz Kasha. If good and evil, that means Tev and Ra, which means Yetzer Tev and Yetzer Ra, and I guess on some level also Nefesh HaLakis and Nefesh HaBahamis is light and dark. How does the Yetzer Hara stand a chance? How could nothing fight with something? How could nothing fight with something? So there's a very interesting idea which repeats itself in Tanya a number of places, and you know you have to learn Tanya's language. Tanya has code. And if you learn Tanya's language, words become more meaningful than just words. One of the codes of the Tanya, and it comes up again and again, it's here, it's in Chav Zayin, it's in Chav Tes, it's in other places. Magbia Atzma Kanesh, it soars like an eagle. That expression of Maklipa is Magbia Atzma Kanesh, it soars like an eagle. The meaning of the word it soars like an eagle means it bluffs. It bluffs, it pastures. It makes itself look bigger than it is. Alter Rebbe says the only koyach that the Nefesh HaBahamis has is to bluff, is to make it look real. And then he says when the Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh HaBahamis, comes along to a person, makes a proposal of a taiva, even if it doesn't have to. If we say to it, you're nothing, we see that it's nothing. If instead of saying to it that it's nothing, we say, wow, it's real, we made its reality, not itself. That's how the Alter Rebbe explains the interface between the Yetzer Teva, the Yetzer Ra, the Nefesh HaBahamis, and the Nefesh HaLakis. That the Yetzer Hara can only make suggestions. When you don't believe the suggestion, you see that there's no fight. When you do believe the suggestion, your belief is the power. Your belief is from your neshama. Your neshama is real. So now you have to fight. You see, that's how it's explained. So the Alter Rebbe says there is this underlying truth that good and evil is light and darkness. And if good and evil is light and darkness, evil can't fight with good unless we allow it to. And this becomes the second reason why the person who's a Benjamin in Madregas Abenin, when he's in the Shlita state, when he's in the Memshala state, when the Yitzhahara is alive and well, and is trying to live in the way of Taivas, and he never listens to the Yitzhahara. Why? Because Teva and Ra is Eir and Cheshech, light and darkness. And this is already an Alakus idea. Teva is really a Nefesh HaBahamis idea. It's a very big Chiddush. And people misunderstand this. You have to learn Tanya correctly. That's why I'm obsessive about this. I want to teach Tanya what I think, obviously. What I think is nicht das greise Geschäft, but there's nobody here to argue with me. Almost nobody here to argue with me. Yeah, I get away with it. But Teva Beklal is a term of Klipa. In your test, you'll see an exception to this rule. In 19. But if you're learning Chitas, you pay attention to today's Chitas. It talks about the Bilam, the Ucha Laver Pi Hashem. And tomorrow, when he talks about the Yossi is Barach Shomer Rucham, he's talking about the Teva of the Nefesh HaBahamis. The word Teva, classically, typically, usually is an allusion to a containment which isn't holiness, which is a containment, it's a limitation. So Mayach Tachlev is a Teva, is Iyim Behemi, but it's a good Iyim Behemi. That you have a Mayach, you have a Lev, you want to be reasonable. And the second idea, last week's class, this is already talking about Ein and Cheshech, light and darkness. Light is Kedush. Darkness is clean. And Ma'at Eir Dechar B'Cheshech, it's a fact of life. Light is stronger than darkness. If you don't help the Yetzer Hara, he has no power. That's the argument. You know why the Beinani wins. Every time he fights with the Yetzer Hara, even when the Yetzer Hara is on, is because the Yetzer Hara is darkness against the Yetzer Tov, unless we empower him. And the Beinani doesn't empower him. That's all. Light versus dark. That was the second point. It was last week's class. And I added what's in the Kutus Mayan. I think I said this to you last week. I wrote the Kutus Mayan. The Kutus Mayan is a unique mind. It's a special mind. With a philosophical axiom. It's built on a philosophical axiom. In other words, an argument of Seichel, not an argument of Elokus. What's the philosophical axiom? That it's logical, if you could be engaged in something more meaningful, and you choose to be engaged in something less meaningful, to apply the term shtus, or shaita, to that choice. The whole Kutus HaMayin, it's very long, I think it's 31 Maimorim, is predicated on the Yisod. The Maimon is called Umayim Beis Hashem Yotzah V'Yishkos Nachal Hashitim. It's the same Shruach Shtus you have in the Basi Lagani. And Shtus, they translate it as Fali, because they don't hurt anybody's feelings. But Shtus means stupidity. Stupid. Nadish. What's Nadish? If I can be engaged in Muskolas and I choose to eat food, it's a shaitan. It's very... We live in a civilization where this is rampant. People make diminished choices. But the whole Kutus HaMayin is based on a simple principle. Hashem gave you a mind. Your mind understands priority. Your mind understands higher and lower. If you could choose higher and you choose lower, you're a fool. And he talks you through it. There's taivas. Yeah, he talks you through it. There's taivas, physical pleasures and limitations, whether it's food or it's clothing. Higher than that is music and art. Yeah? Higher than that is psychology, there's human emotion, there's human nature. Higher than that is bichlal ideas. Higher than that, lahab is ideas of Torah, and higher even than that is ideas of pnimius Torah. All of these things provide pleasure. What are you going to pick? That's the presentation. And if a person chooses something less or something more, it's foolish. Or in the language of the Tanya, it's darkness against light. You've chosen something that has no reality and made it real. You could, and light says, choose something more meaningful. The person can choose a more meaningful life and a less meaningful life, and they choose the latter. The truth is it's a Rahmanas on them, right? What's the problem in our civilization in America? We cooked off Yenem. And Yenem kocht sich Narishkeit. Meint man am Lassen kochen Narishkeit. Why? It looks so beautiful, and it tastes so beautiful, and it smells so beautiful, and it feels so good, and it makes me popular. And I'm not called a geek and a weirdo and a neb and an extremist and all the other, a goody-goody, all the terms that they use in high school, yeah? So it's an Nisai. And the Nisai itself, it's a big test. It's a very, very big test. I know, I have children. I know how big, I'm not 18 anymore, but it's a big nisoyin, it's a gavaldik nisoyin, and it's really oiren chayshach. So again, getting back to the Tanya, I introduced last week the Kutas Amayim to make this point, that the two reasons that the Beinoni within the state of the Shlita always wins, the first is a Teva, we just do it in Nefesh HaBahamis, of Me'ach Shal Ta'alev. And the other, this is already an union for the Neshama sees Elokus as Eir, and Welt as Choshech, Taives and Aveires, as Choshech, and we have a choice of light over darkness, which is not a hard choice if we're just honest. Those are the points that we learned 2 weeks ago and last week. But last week we learned a third idea. And this third idea really speaks to the two of them. And this is also a point that I want to repeat again for the sake of clarity, because it's conceivable that last week my delivery was a bit not so down, a little bit higher. And that is the idea of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ezreich. The Gemara says that the way we defeat the Yetzer Hara is because Hashem helped us. The Gemara says the way we defeat the Yetzer Hara is because Hashem helped us. We're going to see this at length next page, Yud Gimel, chapter 13. Mitzvah Hashem, okay? So the Rebbe, our Rebbe has a note, a Ha'aret, and that page, Yud Gimel, in the Rishimos, where the Rebbe says that this idea that without Hashem's help you cannot remain in the state of Beinoni is only when the Beinoni is in his Shlita or Memshala phase, not when he's in his Melucha phase. In other words, when a Beinoni is davening, if you don't mind, if a Beinoni is in his Melucha state, in other words, when a Beinoni, thank you very much, when the Beinoni is filled with Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem in a conscious, passionate way, the Yetzer Hara is sleeping. You can to say you don't need Hashem's help is stupid and kfirah. It's shtus. But the idea that Eloi Mole, the idea that without Hashem's help it's impossible, doesn't apply to him. Because right now the Beinoni is essentially like a tzaddik. He's in the middle of davening. He's a melech. Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem are filling his heart and radiating over all of his body. So to do the right thing, not do the wrong thing, is natural. It's his basic condition. And the Rebbe brought this as well. These two ideas, that a Beinoni, when he's off, when he's not a melech, when he's a Moshe, always does the right thing, and never does the wrong thing. He continues to be a Beinoni, is Me'ach Shal Ta'alev, and because it's a fight between Ein and Cheshech, and these two ideas have Hashem's help. Let's read that inside. Mipnei HaChochma. And I'm going to do this quickly. This is just a review. Mipnei HaChochma. I'm on page, what page am I on? 33. Yeah? It's page 33. Daf Yud Zayin Omen Aleph. How many lines from the top is it? 14 lines down on Daf Yud Zayin Omen Aleph. It says, beginning of the line, Mipnei HaChochma Shebenefesh Elokis Shebemayach. Because in every person's neshama, there is a brain, and in the brain there's something called Chochma, that wishes to dominate the city alone. Now, and to be revealed in the three garments of the person's neshama. The entire body, as we discussed before. Shehem, which is Machshava, Dibur, Umaisa, all 613 mitzvahs, Shatayag, Mitzvah, Teda, the 600 Teda canals we discussed earlier. So there's something called Chochma Shebenefesh. Chochma Shebenefesh, you and I call Pinteliyid. That's what we call it. We know what Pinteliyid is. Pinteliyid is a force of Mesiras Nefesh. Pinteliyid is a force of tshuva. But you don't see Pinteliyid every day. You see Pinteliyid on rare occasions, right? In America, a person who does tshuva does it once in his life. So for a moment he experiences Pinteliyid, and then he's like the rest of us, struggling with his Yetzer Hara and so on. So the Alter Rebbe in Tanya discusses what I'm going to call the katnus of the Pinteliyid. The Pinteliyid in a state of gadlus, the Pinteliyid when it's strong. This is a Mesiras Nefesh, which was discussed in chapter 19 in Mitzvah Hashem. We're going to get to Mesiras Nefesh. The Pinteliyid, the Bechinas katnus, the Alter Rebbe calls it Ava Mesateres. The secret love, the hidden love. Ava Mesateres means I'm not right now in a state of fire to jump into fire, a hoyole seer. But the quiet power of the Pintel Yid gets me over the edge. Right, you're right in the middle. It's a harder schlepping here, a saver schlepping here, and I'm relying on my teva of Me'er Shat Alev. I'm relying on this advantage of this clarity called Yitzhak Emet Erachesha, that light is better than darkness. But the Yetzer Hara is schlepping the other way, and the Yetzer Hara is formidable. Yitzhak Nishkan Nebach, he's robust, and he's vigorous, and he's alive, and he's useful, and he's strong, and he's skilled, and he's tactful, and he's scheming, and he's al-Zach. Every power that a person can use of persuasion, in Vadrei Nakok, that's his bread and butter. So how do you win this Yetzer Hara? And the teretz is that along with the Teva of Me'er Shat Alev, and along with this Neracheshach, there's the HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ezei. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ezei, this is the Chochmah Shebenefesh. You see here, Chochmah Shebenefesh. Chochmah Shebenefesh means Pintel Yid. But like I said, the Chochmah Shebenefesh, Pintel Yid, we associate with extreme experience. That would be the Gili of the Chochmah Shebenefesh. Or to use a Kabbalah term, the Gadlus of the Chochmah Shebenefesh. There's also the Katnus of the Chochmah Shebenefesh. Katnus Chochmah Shebenefesh, but Matzah is called Katnus Abba. Emunah, it's Katnus Abba. The strong connection to the Eibishter, but it's quote only Emunah. It's Katnus because it's not felt with a great fire, but it's the Katnus of something very, very, very high. So Chochmah Shebenefesh, when it's in a state of Katnus, means my Pintel Yid, my Neshama, my hidden love, is connected to Hashem in such a way that anything other than the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is against its teva. And over here, the word teva means the highest level of Elokus, and it gives me the additional strength to see to it that the teva of Me'er Shat Alev and the idea of Yisrael Teracheshach should win. That's it. Okay, this is the review from last week. And I'm sorry I took all this time, but as they say in the real world, I'm not really sorry. I'm just saying sorry diplomatically. And we move on. Okay, we move on. Says the Rebbe v'Yafal Pikei, nevertheless. Nevertheless means, even though we're dealing with a person who's in Madrega Sabeinini, not Midas Sabeinini, Madrega Sabeinini. And we know, and we've said it so many times, and we'll keep saying it many times, that Madrega Sabeinini is an interface, it's a mix of Melucho Memshal. I'm on page Tez Zayin, Yud Zayin Omer Aleph, 17 lines from the top of the page. Okay? And when he's davening and learning, and Eisirotz and all those exotic stuff, he's a melech. He tells us about him. When he finishes davening, the Nefesh HaBahamis and the Yetzer Hara wake up. But they don't wake up enough to actually take over the space of the body. They wake up enough to attempt to take over the space of the body. And they never win. Because of these points. Me'er Shat Alev, Yisem Teracheshech, and the Chochmah Shebenefesh, which we just talked about. Says the Rebbe Afal Pikei, nevertheless, this is really basic. Right? We're about to read, you all know. You're not going to call this person a tzaddik mipnei sheyisen ha'er. Sheyisen is a disadvantage. Asher ha'er nefesh l'kiyas of the light of the divine soul. Al ha'cheshech v'sichlos shel ha'klipa over the darkness and foolishness of klipa. Hanitcham ha'meila, which is automatically pushed away. Right? So let me talk. The first idea, what was the first idea? Me'er Shat Alev. Me'er Shat Alev is a teva, and it's connected to the Nefesh HaBahamis. But the second idea of Yitzhak Emet Erachesha, the idea that good and evil is light and darkness, that's already the Nefesh HaLekis. And because of the light of the Nefesh HaLekis is stronger than the darkness of the Nefesh HaBahamis. In other words, the Yetzer Hara doesn't stand a chance unless we let him. We give him the koyach. Says the Rebbe, so you have Yosef is winning. And Yetzer Hara is losing. Nefesh HaLekis is winning. Nefesh HaBahamis is losing. Because light is better than darkness. But that doesn't make you a tzaddik. Why? Because, like I said to you before, Chochmah is in a state of katnus. It's not in a state of gadlus. Says the Rebbe, Eina ele b'shleisha levusheha hanal. It's only in the three garments of the neshama. V'lei b'mehusa v'atzmusa. And it's not in the substance. I hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyway. An essence of the godly soul, al Mahusa Vatzmusa, over the substance and essence, shall klipa of the side of klipa. Ki, Mahusa Vatzmusa shall nefesh abahamis shemea klipa. The substance and the essence of the animal soul which comes from klipa. Shabachol small that lives in the linke zait, in the left side of the heart. It's not at all displaced, not pushed out at all from its place in the Beinani. He sits right there. And again, I want to remind you, a long time ago, once upon a time, we learned a Perek called Tes, chapter 9, Perek Tes, which many people consider one of the most important Parakim in Tanya. Because Tanya, chapter 9 was war. Right? Until chapter 9, we defined the combatants. Who's on this team, and what is his nature and personality, and who's on the other team, what's his nature and personality. Chapter 9 is the war itself. And what do we discover? That every one of these two combatants has a stronghold. Has a place in the body that's preeminently his. Nefesh is in the brain, and what the Alter Rebbe called the right side of the heart. And Nefesh Bahamis is in the left side of the heart, which is Malay Da. So they all are radiating from their center, from their stronghold, from their fortress, to take over the entire body, which is called the Ir Ktana Zu HaGuf, the small city, which is a reference to the Guf, and each one wants to dominate it completely. Now, we're describing a Beinani who's in Madregas a Beinani, that the Nefesh Elokis dominates the body, and Nefesh Bahamis doesn't move an inch from her space, or his space, or its space, in the left side of the heart. But that's not tzaddik, because he's in the heart, he's alive and well. Okay? Because Mahusa Vatzmusa shall nefesh abahamesh me'aklipa, the substance, essence of the animal soul, shebechol asmali, whose stronghold, whose seat, whose fortress, whose base is the left side of the heart. Lenitcha klal mem kemei. It's not pushed out of the left side of the heart. It's just not given permission to depart from its space in the heart to the right side of the heart, and then to the brain, and then to take over the whole body. So he doesn't get to take over the body, but he's in the body. The animal soul in its essence, that means the power of the animal soul, which is higher than behavior, mind and heart, and what's higher than mind and what's higher than heart of the animal soul is very dominant. Then it's not given any actual expression. The Beinani and the Beinani, and he continues to speak, Achar HaTfilah, after that. When the Beinani davens, you could make the case, this is true, when the Beinani davens, you could make the case that he is a tzaddik. Because when the Beinani davens, the left side of the heart has been invaded by Elokus, and the Nefesh Bahamis has been pushed out of his own space. When the tzaddik is davening, when the Beinani is davening, the left side of the heart also loves the Eibush. But Achar HaTfilah, after davening, at least in his space, he's there and he's strong. He's just not Mispasha B'chol HaGuf Kulei. And because he's there, he says, you're not a tzaddik at that time. Because she'ein rish be'esh avas havaya. Because the fire of love for Hashem, and of course I've told you many times, the meaning of the word rishpei means red hot coals. Rishpei Eish means that you have a fire that has heat. Because in order for the fire to be sustainable and real, it can't just be a beautiful flame. You light a piece of paper, it makes a beautiful fire for a fraction of a second, but it's unsustained. Why? Because the concentration of fire, the muhusa fire, what's called the union of Eish, is not flame, it's not shalhevis. It's chamimus. It's choy, it's heat. And if you have fire, no heat, it's easy come, easy go. Rishpei means the intensity, it means the heat, which is the basis for this fire. So after davening, Rishpei, the fire which has an intensity because it's attached to a coal of Avas Hashem, of love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is not revealed in the Beinani. Be'ez galus libi, revealed in his heart, B'chol HaYemoni, in the right side of his heart, Farvos, because he's not davening anymore. During the davening, he was like a melech. During the davening, he was like a tzaddik. After davening, he's not a melech anymore. He's only a moshel and a shalit. And therefore, you can't call him a tzaddik, even though there is this idea of yisrael nefesh. He doesn't say, even though there's idea of me'ech shalit al-alev. Because me'ech shalit al-alev is nefesh bahamis, teva. But the second idea, that Yisrael everyday acheshev, the light is stronger than darkness, comes in the neshama. He says you should know the idea of Yisrael everyday acheshev when you finish davening. It's logical to do a mitzvah, and it's foolish to do an aveda. So if you just use reason, you'll be an emdecherid in every prat, doesn't make you a tzaddik, because that sense of the neshama isn't strong enough to push the Yetzer Hara out of his place in the left side of the heart. So even though it's neshama, in other words, the 2 points that I told you, Moach Shalta Alev is Nefesh HaBahamis, but Yisrael Eretei HaCheshach is neshama. But because it's neshama in a state of katnus, like I explained to you, and therefore the Yetzer Hara is still in his place, you can't be considered a tzaddik because of this. Ki'im, it is only that Teiche Rotzuf Ahava Misuteres. You see, here's the word Misuteres. The interior of the right side of the heart and the brain and the Beinani is Rotzuf. The word Rotzuf means ungeschmiert, smeared, right? If you put a decoration on the walls of a room, it's called Rotzuf, to decorate. But the Rotzuf also means to correct. Imes Hashem Tzrufa, right? Lanit no mitzvah tzaref, to correct. It's takereit teicherot of ava, but it's ava mistar's a hidden love. She ava hativus, it's a natural love, and I want to make it very clear. In this case, the word teva does mean nefesh l'kis. Not like I told you that usually the word teva is associated with nefesh habahamis, because over here we're using the word teva. Al Rabbi says in Perek Yutes, chapter 19, that whenever you want to explain something that doesn't make any sense, you call it teva. It's a very different use of the word. When something is higher than understanding, you call it teva. The inyan of Mesiras Nefesh by a yid is called teva because it's higher than seichel. We're talking about avativis. Sheba nefesh l'kis, because of lakamin. You can see this later in chapters 18 and 19. But when this ava misuteres is in a muster state, it's not that the neshama is woken up because it's a state of Mesiras Nefesh, or as we, Baruch Hashem, are fortunate enough to experience by and large. We're not faced with test of Nisyanis V'Anamur V'Lishem Achor. The Inyan Tshuva. When a Yid has a real Seder of Tshuva, it's also a Gili of Yechidah Sheva Nefesh. Your Gili of Yechidah Sheva Nefesh, you're not going to call Ava Musuteres. The reason you're calling it Ava Musuteres is because it's Yechidah. But again, the word which I think would say it most precisely in Kabbalah, it's Katnus of Yechidah. Yechidah never leaves the Guf. It's stuck in the Mayach. You'll see it Mitzvah and Chitas tomorrow and the day after. Perek Avdallah. Tomorrow and also the day after. Yeah? Tomorrow, in the beginning of the Shir, is when you speak about it, and Medachtach also on tomorrow for sure. Maybe Tuesday also. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, this is the Tev of the Neshama for Mesiras Nefesh the Eibush. But when the Tev of the Neshama of Nefesh the Eibush is in a state of Katnus, it's called Misuteres. Okay, so it's not strong enough to make a person into a tzaddik. It's strong enough to make a person into a beinit. But it's not strong enough to make a person into a tzaddik. So the Alter Rebbe says, in spite of these ideas, and more importantly, the idea that the neshama sees that Tev and Kedusha is oil, and Ra and Klipa is choshech, and light and dark have never had a fight, you're not called a tzaddik because of that clarity, because it's called Teva. It's called Ava Misuteres. It's like I said, I created this expression. It's Yechid, it's Pintel Yid Bakatnus. Pintel Yid Bakatnus gives you a strength about what's right and what's wrong, but only on a, not on such a level that the wrong doesn't exist at all. Okay? V'azayim, because of this, I am 2 lines from the bottom of the Zayin Amud Aleph. Yachalias, it's conceivable that there is Sichlos HaKsil, the foolishness of the fool. And let's speak English, yeah? Forgive me for being vulgar. The stupidity of the stupid one. There's a very big difference between foolish and stupid. How he makes us feel. When someone calls me a fool, I say, oh, you call me stupid, I'm very insulted. The Yetzer Hara is stupid. And what he says is stupidity. And we believe him. So what does that make us? Yeah? It's a sichlos haksil, the foolishness of the fool, the stupidity of the stupid. Hara, which is evil. Be'izgalus, revealed in the heart. In other words, it doesn't venture out of that part of the heart to the whole body. Because if it were to venture out of the left part of the heart to the whole body, we would be called, forgive my candor, a Rasha. But we don't allow it to venture out of the left side of the heart. It's staying in the heart. But in the left side of the heart, command it. You understand? He's verbringing over there. He's enjoying it. On the level of lust and desire, he's busy. The Esav is taiva, to desire, to lust, desires. And again, I love to translate the word taiva to be weak. So the Esav is taiva means to buckle at the knees in weakness. It doesn't touch the word, but it says the point. When a person is faced with a temptation and they find themselves weakened by it, that's the Yetzer Hara right there. Taiva means I don't have koyach to be stronger than it, right? Hashem's taivas are not like our taivas. Hashem didn't buckle at the knees when he said, Dira b'tachteinim. We buckle at the knees when we see something that we need to have, in quotations. Each one according to his Indian. Everybody has their own nisyonis. Nobody has the same tests. But everybody knows what weakness means. Everybody knows what it means. When I see this, I lose all control. Or I want to lose all control. That's the title of the word. Let's have his title. To all matters of the physical world. He says, first of all, bein behet. Ariella, this guy stopped working. I don't know why. He stopped working. It could be the battery. Bein behet. Taivas heter is not an aveda. Taivas it's permitted. It's kosher. I'm allowed. It's mutter. If you'll read the Rambam in Hilchos Deis, literally, you'll say, Dayoch Masha Osra Teira, don't be from it in the Eibush. But against that, you have the Ramban in Kedoshim, who says that there is a phenomenon called Novo B'Rashus Al Teira. 100% from, never done an Aved. He's in a state of Beinani, and Teira calls him a Menuvel. Disgusting, shameful, lowly, feh. How could those two things be true? Because when a person defines themselves by pleasure, even if he's in the parameter of the Shalom, they're not doing anything wrong. But that's life. So b'taivas heter, it's permitted. Now, if you know Tanya chapter 8, which I always refer back to, Perek Ches, chapter 8, the first few lines of Perek Ches, the Alter Rebbe says like Gewaldige Chiddush. He says, the Yetzer Hara v'yid as a teva. This is the same word teva that I used before. The Yetzer Hara v'yid as a teva. What's the teva of the Yetzer Hara of a yid? The teva of the Yetzer Hara of a yid is Avedis he has no desire for. Avedis is a learned art. You have to learn, the Yetzer Hara has to learn to desire an Aveda, because the teva has an interest in it's Avedis. But the Dvarim HaMutarim, if it's kosher and permitted, what does the Jew say? If it's free, I'll take 2. So Dvarim HaMutarim, bring the heter. Taivas heter. It's not that he wants it, desires it. And it says in Kuntus Maya, the same Kuntus Maya that I mentioned earlier, that the only way a Yid does an Aveda, if the Teva of a Yid that he can't do an Aveda, is because he's led from a Heta to Issa. When we indulge in permitted Taivas, we lose our Chush and Ruchnias, and we slide. He explains the Gemara, Hayim Emalei say Kach, 1 Taivas Heta, Ulamach Emalei say Kach, Nocha Taivas Heta, Asher Emalei Leich Aveda Aveda, we cross over from Heta to Issa. So this Beinani, who in his left side of his heart has got a fire for Yonim Behemim, worldly thing. It's not given any chance to radiate and fill the body because he's a Beinani. But in her place, in his place, in its place, he's dominating. So at least we're filled with a desire. We would like to indulge in Taivas Heta. Then he continues. Ben Be'issa Chas V'Sholom. Or worse still, to indulge in prohibited Taivas. And then he adds 3 words. She'ilu lo yispalu kol, as if I never davened. When I davened, Haravas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, I was tzaddik like. Now I'm barely Beinani. You understand? I'm barely Beinani. Why? The Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh HaBahamis, which is the left side of my heart, does not have any expression in my body. Not in my arms, and not in my legs, and not in my mouth, and not in my eyes, and not in my ears, and not in my brain, and not in any area. But in her place, in his place, in its place, he's Mesavet Taiva. Dvarim Asurim, Dvarim Mutarim, and even Dvarim Asurim Chas V'Sholom Elo, it is only Shebadvar Isser. When it comes to the desired prohibited things, it doesn't enter into his mind to actually do it. Because if he were to think about doing it, that would already be in Aveda. And the Beni has no Avedas, and the Huri Aveda, Koshem Aveda, the Storchel Aveda, the Tachis Aveda, the worst of the Aveda itself, that Yechelim live for Lalas Lamecha, they can enter into the brain of this Beni, when he's in the Shlita and Memshala state, will evolve the Teidah of Aveda and to confuse him when it comes to matter of the Teidah of Aveda. And we're going to stop here now. And next week, I'm going to start again. I really want to start from the words Elo Shebetvaris, but I'll probably start from the words Bein Behete Bein B'Yis. Okay, so we did two things today. We reviewed last week's class. I think I added clarity to it. And we learned Nachar Shtickle. In other words, we're actually moving through the Tanya. It's moving slowly, but we're actually moving through the Tanya. Okay, we'll take a break, a minute or two or three or five, and we're going to do it Hashem's Help Hayem Yem. I just want to say that the Maimed of Friday is unfinished. And I'm doing it tomorrow, and it's even possible that I'm continuing on Tuesday because it's from Lamed Ches, this Maimed. And it's not such a long Maimed. But I dafka chose to divide it because I wanted to give the Maimed the attention that it needs. If you can come during the week, that it hano'ahum. Okay, good morning.